a small group from the larger 8th Principle Project team, designed today's service to help the congregation and ourselves come to understand the history of colonization here in the Southwest United States and to better understand the lingering effects of such colonization. These lingering effects include racism, colorism, and language discrimination. This will not be a comfortable service. We have had difficult conversations and introspections, and we ask you to join us in this uncomfortable and essential work. We will begin with excerpts from one of the Unitarian Universalist Association's 2020 Actions of Immediate Witness. Each year, the UUA develops and disseminates actions of immediate witness that seek to address the pressing matters of our time. This year, one of those calls to action was titled 400 Years of White Supremacist Colonization. Our group understands this action of immediate witness to be both essential and incomplete. While the document brings to light many facts essential to dismantling racism within our Unitarian Universalist faith, it is at the same time overwhelmingly focused on the colonization of Eastern North America. Today, we present excerpts from the UUA's Action of Immediate Witness, interspersed with questions and reactions grounded in our experiences and understandings as Unitarian Universalists living in the Southwest. We ask you to sit with these words. Let them affect you intellectually and spiritually so that you may be called to action.
Whereas 2020 marks the 400th anniversary of the first Mayflower voyage, transporting pilgrims from England to North American Atlantic coast.
Whereas 2020 marks the 422nd anniversary of the Spanish colonization and the 174th anniversary of the U.S. colonization of northern Mexico.
Whereas the Pilgrims' invasion of the Wampanoag people led to the enslavement of indigenous peoples on the East Coast and the removal of and genocide against indigenous peoples across the continent.
Whereas the U.S. invasion of northern Mexico led to the racialization of Mexican Americans and the dispossession of Mexican and indigenous peoples.
Whereas many Unitarian Universalist congregations uncritically trace their origins to the Pilgrims' free church tradition, a mythos that sanctifies white supremacy and depends upon erasure of indigenous peoples.
Whereas UUCLC descends from the same Unitarian Universalist tradition.
Whereas white settler colonialism is extractive, expansive, and based in violent patriarchy, resulting in a preponderance of missing and murdered indigenous women and creating unsustainable conditions for all living beings.
Whereas New Mexico has the fifth highest population of indigenous people and the highest number of missing and murdered indigenous women cases in the country, 78 in 2017.
Whereas the administration continues in attacks on indigenous people's lands, sacred sites, and sovereignty, even as a federal district judge has temporarily blocked the taking of the Mashpee Wampanoag's lands.
Whereas many of us continue to benefit from the dispossession of Mexican and indigenous peoples in New Mexico of their lands, sacred sites, and sovereignty.
Therefore, be it resolved that we, the delegates of the 2020 General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association, call upon the Unitarian Universalist Association and its member congregations to continue to gather in solidarity with the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, Standing Rock Nation, and all indigenous peoples struggling to preserve their lands, waters, peoples, sacred sites, and sovereignty.
With whom in solidarity in Las Cruces?
Work nationally, statewide, and locally on public policy that is decolonizing, such as establishing Indigenous Peoples Day, including Indigenous peoples' histories and public education curricula, and eliminating racist monuments, flags, and mascots.
How might we build upon the New Mexico law passed last year that replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day? How can we support the Yazzie Martinez ruling in order to ensure an equitable education for all students?
Work to stop and reverse ecological harm in genuine collaboration with and taking leadership from communities most consistently and harshly impacted by extractive exploitation of land, water, air, and all beings.
How do we support the 23 sovereign indigenous nations in New Mexico?
Research, identify, and acknowledge the indigenous peoples historically and/or currently connected with the land occupied by congregations, and find ways to act in solidarity with or even partner with those indigenous peoples.
How do we move beyond acknowledgement towards restitution?